Hello you beautiful misfits, my name is Matt and this is Pixel Burn, where I normally take a snarky look at the week's gaming news, but since this is my last video of the year I thought I'd instead take a fond look back at some of my top games of 2017. Which is going to be a bit tricky since, in all honesty, this year has been a fucking amazing one for top-notch quality games. So many great titles came out across so many platforms that I can't possibly feature everyone's favourites. That and I only play on PC, so you can banish all hope of seeing any real console exclusives on this list. Yes, I'm sure Horizon Zero Dawn, Super Mario Odyssey and whatever exclusives the Xbox One had this year are really great games. I'm glad you got to play them and enjoy them. I didn't, so they won't be on this list. Okay, I did technically play about 1 hour of Zelda Breath of the Wild during a lunch break this year, but that's nowhere near long enough to form a meaningful connection to it, so it's not going to be on this list. Sorry. Anyhow, without further ado, I now present to you all the Pixel Burn Totally Arbitrary Games of the Year Awards, or T.A.G.O.T.Y.As for short. A simple list of my top games of 2017, in no particular order of quality or specialness, yet all of which tickled my proverbial fancy in some way or another. If I absolutely had to pick a single favourite game from this list, Hollow Knight would be number one, or at the very least, joint first place. Team Cherry's gorgeous, beautifully melancholic, cutesy goth Metroidvania is not only hands down one of the most charming games I've had the privilege to play, it's also in my opinion one of the best examples of the genre. It kept me utterly captivated for the tens of hours it took me to get 100% completion. So much so I even made a short video guide for the final boss, which seems to have helped some people, which is nice. Now be warned, there is a noticeable pinch of Dark Souls in there, by way of a difficulty that's challenging yet fair, a familiar soul recovery mechanic, and the means by which the world's story and lore are presented to you. But it is only a pinch, just a little to spice things up, so don't let any deep-rooted dislike for Souls games put you off playing this. If you're a fan of the Metroidvania genre, you absolutely owe it to yourself to play Hollow Knight. I mean, I could gush about this game for at least another hour. The sheer number and variety of boss encounters, the way the game encourages and rewards exploration, the ability to customise certain ability charms to suit your playstyle, Christopher Larkin's gorgeous soundtrack, and so on and so forth. But we've got other games to go through, so all I'll say is that right now is pretty much the perfect time to get Hollow Knight, since you'll also be able to enjoy the 2 completely free DLC for it that adds new bosses and more juicy lore. Buy it, play it, and love it like I do. If Hollow Knight had to share a top spot for my all-time favourite game of 2017, NIER Automata, or NIER Automata, or NIER Automata, is the game it'd be sat next to on the big shiny top game throne. These awards are completely arbitrary, however, so that point is moot. Yoko Taro's surreal exploration of human nature, existentialism, and fit women in short skirts cutting up robots not only has a phenomenal soundtrack, which quite rightly took away a little statuette at this year's Game Awards, but uses the medium of video games itself in ways that rocked my little world. If you're the kind of person who, for example, loved the weird shit Kojima did with the medium in Metal Gear Solid 2, Yoko Taro's own unique brand of bonkers should be right up your alley. And since this is also a Platinum Games title, the good kind like Transformers Devastation, not the bad kind like Legend of Korra, the gameplay is just as engaging as the narrative. I would say as enjoyable, but, well, how do I put this? NIER Automata is not a cheery game. Without wanting to seem too pseudo-academic and wankily pretentious, NIER Automata challenges its audience to the point of being outright confrontational at times. I'm not talking gameplay-wise either, although this is a game you can and should, if you need to, play on easy, without shame or letting anyone mock you for it. No, NIER Automata challenges its audiences in less tangible areas like emotions, preconceptions, and expectations. Its haunting story has betrayal, heartbreak, ponderings on the nature of human/android existence, the meaning of life, transhumanism, philosophy, and countless other big topics, all plastered in more shades of grey than a navy warehouse full of tins of battleship paint. There is plenty of humour there too though, just enough to smooth out the rougher edges of all the dark stuff. At times, however, NIER Automata can make you feel like a worthless piece of absolute shit on a deep personal level, even while you're having a whale of a time with the gameplay itself. That doesn't really sell it, does it? Okay, here's a better analogy. NIER Automata is like Studio Ghibli's Grave of the Fireflies, but with moments of levity. If you've seen Grave of the Fireflies, you'll know what I mean. If you've never seen Grave of the Fireflies, watch Grave of the Fireflies. Ideally under a big comfy duvet with a box of tissues, a hot water bottle, a stuffed toy and a nice cup of tea. You'll need them. If I had to make one serious criticism of NIER Automata, it's that the game's second act is just the first act all over again from a different perspective. You can breeze through it much quicker however, and the change in perspective genuinely brings new insights into the story and characters. Then when the third act begins, oh boy that third act. If the game's three acts were the original Star Wars trilogy, then Act 1 would be A New Hope, Act 2 would be Return of the Jedi, and Act 3 would be The Empire Strikes Back. It kicks you straight in the gut from the outset, then grabs you by the throat and doesn't let go until the credits roll for one of the game's 26 possible endings. Yes, 26 possible endings. The majority of them are brief jokey ones though, like eating a fish that poisons you, or unplugging your character's primary central processing unit, or self-destructing on a space station. Finally, while it is technically the sequel to the original NIER, you don't need to have played any of that one whatsoever in order to fully experience this one. Although if you do want to have some kind of idea as to what's going on in the grander scheme of all things NIER, as well as its predecessor, the Drakengard series, check out the charming Mr. Klimps and his NIER analysis videos. They'll tell you everything you need to know and give you a damn good chuckle at the same time. Some of you might be surprised by this entry, although you'll never be as surprised as I was. The newest instalment in the long-running, somewhat ragged by now Assassin's Creed franchise shows what you can accomplish when you're not forcing your developers to pump one out every year, and when you give the team behind Assassin's Creed Black Flag a good amount of creative leeway. The result is one of the freshest feeling Assassin's Creed games since Assassin's Creed 2, and with the protagonist as charming and likeable, if not more so than old Ezio Auditore da Firenze was.
Sit down. There is no need to attack a man from behind. We're not numbering him 4 to 1. Huh?
You told us to secure every advantage possible over a dangerous foe.
Yes. And I am very dangerous!
As some of you know too well, I was initially tempted by this one purely for the ancient Egyptian setting, and Ubisoft have done an amazing job bringing the Ptolemaic era to life. Origin's game world really does feel like a living, breathing world where people go about their own business, animals do their thing, and bandits patrol the distant dunes. I genuinely haven't felt so thoroughly immersed in exploring a game world since... Witcher 3? Speaking of which, it would be remiss of me to say Assassin's Creed Origins doesn't borrow more than a few things from other games. Many of the side quests feel quite similar to Witcher 3 ones, albeit without the depth or moral choices, while infiltrating one of the many enemy fortresses dotted around the huge in-game map felt somewhat reminiscent of Metal Gear Solid 5 at times. And yet the way Assassin's Creed Origins implements these ideas doesn't detract from the overall experience or feel like mere imitation. This is still an Assassin's Creed game, so if you never liked the series in the first place, this one probably won't change your mind. If, however, like me, you kind of fell off the bandwagon around Brotherhood, Syndicate or Assassin's Creed 3, this is the ideal opportunity to climb back on. And if you never got into the series first time round but would like to dip in, Origins is the perfect introduction to it. One last thing, I bloody love the photo mode in this game. Seriously, I probably spent more of my 80+ hour playtime taking pictures of pyramids and cats, which you can pet, than I actually did playing the game itself. Indeed, I was one of the grand total of about 14 people who played and enjoyed this one. Alright, I'm being a tad hyperbolic there. It was substantially more than that, though not as many as I feel it deserved, quite likely due to Bethesda's ghastly review policy. Perhaps also due to it not being the Prey sequel fans of the original wanted, but as a System Shock fan I felt right at home on Talos 1. At least as at home as anyone can feel on a space station overrun by monstrous shadow beings from the deepest, darkest, coldest void of space. Not instantly either. Prey took a little while to grow on me, but then it didn't immediately repel me either. It was a classic slow burner, you know, gradually teasing me ever onwards with audio logs, great environmental storytelling, and the main overarching mystery, while also gently marinating me in lots of other little side stories and slices of life on Talos 1 along the way. The ending, when it came, wasn't much of a surprise however, though not because of the writing. You see, the game gave me so much freedom to muck about and explore, I ended up inadvertently spoiling myself by getting an alternate ending first. On the one hand, bit of a downer. but on the other, a testament to how accommodating Prey can be to its players. You want to hop into the station's only working, albeit physically inaccessible escape pod before the main story lets you? Prey will not only let you do just that, if you're clever enough with crates, the foam gun and acrobatics, but also reward you for it, with an ending that somewhat spoils the main one. Long ramble short, if you're a fan of immersive sims like System Shock, Bioshock, Deus Ex or Dishonored, then Prey will quite likely sink its shadowy tendrils into you just as deeply. Don't expect a sequel though. Oh, and on top of all that, it's also got Benedict Wong in it. You'll doubtless be familiar with him from movies such as Prometheus, Doctor Strange and The Martian, or shows like Black Mirror, though I always associate him with his appearance in this episode of the IT Crowd, which made Prey a tad more surreal for me for a while, at least until I eventually adjusted to the fact he wasn't going to suddenly explain the rules of Street Countdown to me.
What is Street Countdown?
It's more or less the same as normal Countdown, except we play it on the street.
Now this one won't be to everyone's taste, but for me the 2017 remake of Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap from Lizard Cube was a big gooey dollop of yummy nostalgia with a crisp candy shell coating. Just listen to that music for a moment. That right there, folks, is part of my childhood frozen in musical form. Although back then it sounded like this. And the graphics look like this. Indeed, this is about as faithful a remake of the Master System and Game Gear original as you can get. So faithful, in fact, that you can switch the graphics and sound from old to new at the click of a button. But we're not in the mid-90s anymore, are we? We're in hell year 2017, and you all want to know how it plays to your modern sensibilities, don't you? Well, I may be a wee bit biased, but I still think it holds up. I mean, it's not going to give you 1,000 hours of dialogue options, interspecies romance or open-world tower climbing. My final playthrough clocked in at a modest 5 hours. The game mechanics, however, still hold up, although that Samurai Castle area can go and bite my arse with how ridiculously difficult it is. Was. Still is. Besides, it is more than just a mere port, with some admittedly lovely and charming graphical updates. Lizard Cube worked with original Wonder Boy series creator Ryuichi Nishizawa to not only ensure it was faithful to the original, but add extra bonus areas for people like me who played the original to exhaustion, which in my case was on a Sega Game Gear plugged into a wall socket. Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap is very much a case of your mileage may vary, but still a solid game even after all these years, and I loved it, so it gets a place on this list. What can I say about this one except it's perhaps the best Sonic game in decades? Although I have to confess I stopped playing them after Sonic 3, before they began adding pointless shit like Shadow the Edgelord and Big the Fucking Cat to the series. If you grew up playing the classic Sonic the Hedgehog games on the Mega Drive or Genesis, then Sonic Mania is literally a rose-tinted time portal straight back to the heart of your fond childhood memories. Although it absolutely does not look or play exactly like the old games did. Rather, it looks and plays how you remember they did. A small but important difference. Sure, about half the levels are remixes of ones from the old Sonic games of yore, but they're classic levels for a reason. Plus the team behind it, a group of die-hard Sonic fans whose love for the originals practically bleeds out of every on-screen pixel, have put enough of a unique spin on them, no pun intended, to make them feel fresh again. Without spoiling too much, the boss fight against Robotnik at the end of the revamped Chemical Plant Zone in particular slapped a smile on my face wider than the Grand Fucking Canyon. The new levels like Press Garden Zone and Studiopolis Zone meanwhile feature interesting new mechanics and some very cool boss fight set pieces. So if you're a young'un wondering what all the fuss is about with the old Sonic games on those dinosaur consoles that annoying old people like me wax lyrical about, get yourself a copy of Sonic Mania and, with it, an insight into why we moan so much about those modern 3D Sonic games you inexplicably love for some mad reason. Ah, Wolfenstein 2, der neue Koloss, as they call it in Germany. I had something of an intense internal debate about whether or not to include this one on my list, since for every leap and bound it takes over Wolfenstein The New Order, it feels as though it also takes a few stumbles backwards at the same time. For one thing, there's no chapter select like there was in The New Order, although you do get plenty of opportunities to revisit previous levels to get any collectibles you might have missed. The stealth elements from the previous game are also still there, yet Machine Games have somehow made them worse, to the point of being completely unfair and downright impossible to ghost through. No matter how stealthy and sneaky you try to be, eventually some flying drone or random Nazi perched on a ledge a mile high will spot you and set the alarms blaring. And don't get me started on the level design for the missions set in New York. Whoever designed those should be forced to endure a 10-hour lecture on level design from Sandy Peterson and John Romero. One of the biggest criticisms you've likely heard about this game is that it burdens you from the outset with a maximum health score of 50, making the classic run and gun approach more frustrating than fun. From a story perspective, it makes sense. BJ Blazkowicz is only recovering from having a castle dropped on him after all, but can make some early areas of the game almost a chore to get through. Without wanting to spoil anything too much, however, old Blazko eventually gets better, for want of a more appropriate term, and by the end you'll be blasting packs of Nazis to bits with all the vim and vigour you had in the New Order. Despite all these gripes, however, once I got over that initial hump, I had a fucking whale of a time with Wolfenstein 2. The story is leaps and bounds above the first, which was no slouch in the narrative department to begin with, and goes completely bonkers, while still somehow managing to remain somewhat grounded. It walks that very fine tightrope between grindhouse theatrics and respectfulness for the subject matter, yet manages to pull it off, although it does have a few wobbles along the way. The story will keep you engaged right up to the admittedly lackluster final boss segment. The supporting cast genuinely feel like real people a lot of the time, and the Nazi-occupied world building is absolutely top notch. Overall, Wolfenstein 2 is hit and miss, but it definitely hits more often and more spectacularly than it misses, with the emphasis on spectacle. If you're still unsure, then absolutely give the free demo version a try before you buy. And that's it for my top games of 2017, although there were a few others I very much enjoyed yet didn't quite make the list for various reasons. So without further ado, here are a couple of honourable mentions, because it's just been that good a year for video games. Starting with the game that's been on damn near everyone's lips this year, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, aka PUBG, aka PUBG, aka Plunkbat. I haven't played as much of this as I'd like due to lack of time, making videos, real life horseshit, lack of friends to play it with, and other factors, but what I have played of it has been rollicking good fun. Few games have given me a thrill quite like desperately exploring an abandoned house for supplies and spotting some cheeky little scrote hiding by an exterior window, thinking they're being oh so clever and getting the drop on you, right before you aim out of said window and pump their skull full of multiple rounds of buckshot with an automatic shotgun. Even if Brendan PlayerUnknown Green himself has been somewhat of a tit with his comments about other devs copying his original idea, like he has some sort of monopoly on a concept initially popularised by a film starring Beat Takeshi. Anyway, as for why it's not on my G.O.T.Y list, well, by the time this video goes up it'll only just have come out of early access, and unlike Polygon, I do have a smidgen of something resembling standards. So as fun as I found it to be in my limited time with the game, I just can't give PUBG a G.O.T.Y ATT. Although I do look forward to playing some more of it. Dishonored Death of the Outsider, meanwhile, didn't quite live up to the high mark of Dishonored 2 in my opinion, though that's not to say it was bad. For one thing, it pretty much confirms Arkane should have gone for a fully regenerating mana bar from the outset of Dishonored 1. Ditching those little blue vials is one of the best creative decisions they've made, since it gives you so much more freedom to experiment with your funky supernatural powers. One in particular adds a new level of quasi-social stealth to the proceedings that, if used carefully, can really spice up the game's dynamic. The level design is also still absolutely bloody fantastic, especially the bank heist level, feeling as always like real lived-in spaces for you to worm your way into like some wizard voyeur. The overarching story, however, falls a bit flat and feels somewhat rushed, as though Arkane were desperately trying to reboot the whole franchise for a new trilogy without Corvo and co. Still, if you're a fan of the first two, you'll definitely get a satisfying amount of enjoyment and play out of it, but for new players, I'd recommend Dishonored 1 first. Meanwhile, the 2017 PC release of Bayonetta was absolutely fantastic, of course, as you'd expect, because it's bloody Bayonetta, innit? What other games give you such a delirious blend of ass-kicking action and ridiculous high camp? Pretty much the only reason this isn't up there on my Games of the Year list is, well, it didn't quite feel right putting a port of a game originally released in 2010 on my list of top games of 2017. Now, I fucking love Bayonetta with all my heart and would instantly recommend it without hesitation or remorse, but I can't rightly call it one of my top games of 2017. Not with so many other great new games having been released this year. That doesn't stop me recommending it to you anyway though, does it? Because I do, wholeheartedly. Hell, with the announcement at this year's Game Awards of a Bayonetta 3 in the works as a Switch exclusive, as well as Bayonetta 1 and 2 also coming to that console, I've never been more tempted to buy a Nintendo Switch. That's how much I recommend Bayonetta. Just as I couldn't include Bayonetta on my G.O.T.Y list, I also couldn't include XCOM 2 War of the Chosen, because it's technically an expansion pack, not a full game. Even though it happens to be an absolutely brilliant expansion pack in the classic sense of the word, that improves on the already brilliant original in so many ways, not least with how it makes the Geoscape segments far less of a crazy insane rush to get that initial Alien Black Site mission done ASAP. You're given a lot more leeway to play the game in the way you want to, without feeling railroaded into certain build orders or particular branches of the research tree. Now sure, the expansion does add 3 Shadow of Mordor style alien nemesis who can crash your party during any given mission at any time, and they're not easy fuckers to deal with at the best of times. In my view, however, that's easily a fair trade for many more ways to reduce that annoying game-ending Doom tracker at the top of the map screen. By the way, did I mention this expansion adds a bunch of hero characters and new Resistance faction leaders, voiced by pretty much half the cast of Star Trek The Next Generation? Yep, this expansion lets you have Councillor Deanna Troi as a stalker-esque sniper scout, teaming up with Worf as a badass human-alien hybrid with an auto shotgun, to do a mission given to you by Commander Riker.
I'm glad to see our joint effort paid off like we hoped.
Or Tasha Yar, while Q gives you a lowdown on why aliens are inferior to psionically enhanced humans, while you gun down hordes of alien-contaminated zombies in the ruins of the pre-alien old world. Basically, if you own vanilla XCOM 2, then War of the Chosen is a complete no-brainer. If I had to criticise it, I'd say it somewhat makes the original grim, gritty, desperate guerrilla war for humanity tone of XCOM 2 less Battlestar Galactica and a teensy bit more X-Men. But then when has XCOM ever been 100% super serious, eh? The 1994 original featured purple aliens in green spandex, for crying out loud. Anyhow, that's your lot of pixel burn for the rest of this miserable arbitrary 12-month period of human existence. If you still liked it, the video of course, then please do let me know by clicking the requisite button down below. I hope you all at least had a very lovely Christmas with your friends, family, loved ones, significant others and or pets. Meanwhile, till next year, you can go now.